Welcome back everyone to Dragons Collective. This is the fortnightly D&D RPG variety show where a bunch of creators get together to discuss, in this episode, their favourite or the best D&D monsters. Now, without further ado, let's see what the first creator thinks.
Hey everybody, Bob here, and today I'm going to talk to you about one of my favorite monsters in all of Dungeons & Dragons. No, I'm not talking about dragons or beholders or even mind flayers, which all are really cool in their own right. Today I'm here to talk to you about oozes. No, not that kind of ooze. This type of ooze. Back in the day when I was younger, I always thought that oozes were really cool. I'd see them in monster manuals and other books. Specifically, this 3rd edition gelatinous cube always stuck out to me. But I never really got to play against or experience them as a younger player because none of my dungeon masters ever really used them. Since I became a forever DM, I've tried to incorporate them into my games, and I've actually used them quite a bit on my YouTube channel recently. I can say for sure that they are excellent monsters to face off against your players. Every time I've used an ooze, it's been a very deadly situation. I've basically had almost player death or TPK every single time. Well, what makes oozes such great enemies? Well, let's talk about what oozes actually are. Oozes have their own type of category in the monster manual. They are unaligned with other creatures. They come in various shapes, sizes, and colors, each of them carrying unique properties. The monster manual states that oozes live in dark and damp areas, mostly underground, flowing from one place to the next. They typically attack their opponents by engulfing them in some manner and using their acidic properties to digest anything around them. Depending on the size, shape, and color, the properties from each ooze changes. Some of them have different resistances to types of damage, like slashing, and in fact, cool properties when these attacks are done against them. For example, the gray ooze, while only a challenge level 1/2, can be pretty nasty to fight at low levels. It's amorphous, so it can squeeze through small spaces and can corrode metal objects, including weapons. After dealing damage, the weapon takes a permanent and cumulative -1 penalty to damage rolls, and when it reaches -5, the weapon is destroyed. Black Puddings, one of my all-time favorite and deadliest monsters that I've used, has insane damage dealing possibilities. Its pseudopod attack does 1d6 bludgeoning damage plus 4d8 acid. If you score a critical hit against a player with a Black Pudding, that will most likely drop any character levels 5 and below. Trust me, I know this for a fact. And perhaps the most iconic ooze of all time is the gelatinous cube. What makes this ooze so terrifying is that it's transparent. It actually is very hard to see, even in plain sight. Unaware PCs may only see what's entrapped in the ooze rather than the ooze itself. They may think a floating skeleton is coming at them, and then all of a sudden they are engulfed. The cubes can be used as a deterrent. It could block passageways and force players to make a hard decision. Finally, what makes oozes such a fantastic enemy to use in a campaign is that they just don't care about you. They're not some maniacal dragon trying to overtake a land. They're not demons or devils which are trying to plot against mortals. They just exist. There's no face to look at while you fight them. No one to plead with when they trap you. And certainly, no mercy as they digest you. Well, that about does it for me. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope I've maybe inspired you to give oozes a chance in your own games. If you'd like to see more of my content, head over to Tabletop Bob. I focus primarily on 5e live plays, Dungeon Master advice, and guides. I'll see you on the tabletop.
Hi folks, this is Andy from Potable Gaming and welcome to Dragons Collective, where this week we're talking about monsters and our favourite monsters. Now, I'm approaching this as usual from a player's perspective. I haven't had a chance to DM much, but I kind of break down monsters into a couple of different categories. So I'm not going to lie, I don't think I can go through and to say this particular monster from Bestiary is what I like. I don't think I have one, but I do like what monsters represent. So I like monsters, first off, who can teach you things. I like monsters who have resistances, who you have to adopt a tactic to. Not in the moment, I'm not going to lie, that's often the most stressful thing, but afterwards I like to know what that monster's taught me. So when I go into another fight, I'm like, yeah, okay, last time I had to fight a skeleton, I realised that my sword wasn't going to do very good. So what I've done is I've brought this club now because it was cheap at the market, and now I've got a bit of defence against it. I'm prepared to attack that, and that's really cool, that's really exciting. I remember once watching another player get completely ruined by a rust monster because it destroyed his armour and his entire shtick was just being a dude in a tin can, and it was very, very funny. I also like monsters who do something different. I remember once we were playing at Crypt of the Everflame. I don't know if this was the monster as written or it was just what my DM decided to do, but he ended up being a Warlord class boss. So instead of just being a hitbox that we had to take apart, he ended up taking us apart with interesting tactics. And what had previously been just us brute forcing our way through a campaign turned into us having to fight a clever tactical monster, and that was really cool. But there are other types of monsters I enjoy. First off, I enjoy anything that can make you feel powerful. So I've mentioned before how much I love cannon fodder, and anything weak can be cannon fodder. But I also love maybe swarm enemies or very small groups of enemies that can be taken out with a very powerful attack. I remember once taking out a swarm of disembodied, possessed hands, the necromancers there, with my sorcerer with a fire, like cone attack, and just kind of stepping out and just boom, and blowing them all away. And that was great fun. I've dined out on that story for a while. I like big, scary monsters you just get to kind of take apart. I enjoyed things like Attack on Titan, and it's really cool to have that moment where you and your party say you're a massive monster and like, we'll give it a go, and just diving in and just throwing everything at the kitchen sink. Because again, RPGs, much like video games, you often have that situation where you're trying to store the cool thing for later, and it's nice to go, you know what, this is later, let's throw everything out there. And finally, an honourable mention to monsters that are just fun. Stuff like goblins and grindylows and things which can have a bit of character. Anything that allows a DM who's good at putting on silly voices to put on a silly voice, I am here for. But what are your favourite monsters? Anything about what I've said so far resonate or not resonate, as the case may be? Let me know down in the comments below. But as always, folks, I've been Andy, and it's your round.
So I'm going to cheat a little bit and copy Andy. I don't have a single monster in D&D that, or family necessarily of monsters that really grabs me. But what I do like is animated objects and the things around you coming to life that grab you. Now, I'm talking like the trappers. You're walking across the floor and or someone in your party just gets engulfed by almost the floor. I think that the idea of that you're always having to be careful, slightly pay attention, I think that's a great thing. And the trapper miniature that you can get from WizKids pre-painted does the job perfectly. Now, other things. Imagine, if you will, a sort of abandoned, dark, dimly lit castle. You're walking along the corridors and you're seeing these suits of armour. Now, some of them you walk past and you hear a sort of a clink. The metal is slightly moving and you think maybe nothing of it. But you get past and all of a sudden this suit of armour or suits of armour come to life. It's just, again, another way that you have to be always, as a party, on your toes. If your perception's not high enough, well, you're going to have something quite cool, and a bit of armour coming to life, animated armour attacking you. And, well, it's always sort of created in either, the games I've been in, it's always created a fun, interesting plot point for that sort of, not episode, that session, when something like this has happened. Now, it doesn't always go to plan for necessarily the DM. I think I've told it before, but my favourite story, including animated armour, we actually ended up putting a barrel over the animated armour that had iron rings and it couldn't break free. So what was going to be a slightly challenging animated armour fight turned into almost sort of a comedic thing where this animated armour was just like, running around the room almost, but unable to break free. And that was just brilliant. That would never have happened if it was a small goblin. It would have just, come out of it. If anything that had sort of logics behind it, it would have just got out of the barrel. But the animated armour didn't have that. It's just a cool way, with the trapper coming out the floor, a carpet grabbing someone, even a mimic coming out of a chest, or being the chest, or the door. It just keeps players on their toes, and that's the style of D&D that I really like. Sometimes you want the big epic dragon. Sometimes you want the small little kobolds. And sometimes you just want the surprise that you weren't quite ready for. Anyway, that's enough from me. On with the next creator.
The way seems clear, we seem to have lost them, but we just got to cross this river. Awesome, maybe the wizard can give us some light. Yes, no problem. Brilliant, thanks for the light. That wasn't me! Hello everyone, I'm Clara and I'm going to show you how I made these will-o'-the-wisps. You could of course make them without the lights, but I'm going to show you how I did it with the lights here in a real quick tutorial. These are prototypes, so you could probably do them better yourself, but with that, let's get down to the table, shall we? Okay, so I started out with some cheap tea lights. I got these from a dollar store, so I had like 6 for $1, but I got ones that flickered, giving me most of the components I wanted. But the bases were too big for my standard tile square, so I decided to make new bases. I used old paint pots for this, just because I could fit all the components inside. I actually bought some on-off switches separately. Again, they were super cheap, and I cut a hole in the side of my new base to fit that in. Then what I did was I took the tea light and I just basically took it apart because I wanted the encapsulation for the battery, because that should just hold the battery in nice and firm but still allow me to change the battery afterwards. And it meant that by cutting it down it would fit inside the paint pot that I was using. Once I did that, I poked a couple of holes through it and I made some wire legs which I soldered the LEDs from the tea lights onto. This was just to give them a bit of extra height, and then I soldered one side of the LED to the switch. Then I placed the battery holder within the base, and what I did was I then soldered another wire coming from the other end of the switch out to the positive side of the battery terminal on the bottom. I didn't glue it in place, I just poked it through, and then I brought the other LED leg through a hole in the top of the battery base so that when you put the battery in and then screw it down, it just clamped it all together, so it worked, and it turned it on and off using the switch, which was ideal, and it worked really well. And once I'd done that, I then got some cotton wool and I just feathered it out. So I used some tacky glue and I put a little bit of this on the bottom and the top of the light cover, and yeah, just feathered it out until I had the sort of shape I wanted. I then painted the base, so I actually painted it, I primed it black first of all, then I stuck some textured mud on top of that. I will add some grass to it as well, and maybe a little tree. I also have a purplish light, which I had some LEDs, some UV LEDs from elsewhere, so I used one of them. So you could buy different coloured ones, but the ones from these tea lights, they do also have this flickering thing, which looks really good. So thanks so much for watching, and until next time, take care and bye bye.
Hey everybody, Rivers here for Dragons Collective. This subject this time is the best monsters in D&D, and I have a few of them. So of course number one for me is dragons. I use dragons as often as I can, whether it's the big bad evil guy or a henchman or a friendly NPC or just a silver dragon in disguise that nobody knows about and the party just happens to meet him, so he ends up being a little helpful. Beholder, because they're cool and I like using Beholder. I've used them twice in my campaign. Same one. First time they met him, they were like, I don't know, 5th, 6th level. They were no match for a Beholder and his entourage, so they didn't fight him even though the paladin really wanted to. But they ended up seeing him again when they were 11th or 13th, somewhere in there, and they destroyed him. So he attacked them and they showed no mercy on him. And of course, I'm not sure about 5e, but bandits, I play a lot of 3.5, and I use bandits a lot because bandits you can level up or down to what you need for your party, and So I like bandits. Like I said, I haven't looked really at the 5e book on them, but I always use them as basic bad guys, and usually lower levels, but you can get them a little higher. They just act a little differently and a little harder to kill. But like I said, I really love using dragons in D&D, which is Dungeons and Dragons, so go figure. But I've used red dragons, black dragons, blue dragons, green dragons, white dragons, gold dragons, brass dragons, and silver dragons. So I covered a lot of different dragons. And not to spoil anything, but Tiamat might be in there somewhere coming. So don't watch this if you're one of my players. But anyway, that's my pick for the best monsters in D&D for the Dragons Collective. I'm Rivers. Have a good game.
So what can you expect from Don't Be Bored over the next week or so? Well, I'm going to be taking a look at the Plastic Dragons repository, which is sort of a way of storing dice and rolling them. 9, if you're interested. On a 12, oh, that's a D12, and on a D20, a 1. So, not the best rolls, but a pretty cool item. I'm going to be taking a bit more of a look at that at some point. And, well, without further ado, let's jump into the news. So, 2 bits of interesting news from Renegade Game Studios, known very much for their board games. They're going to be releasing 2 different RPG systems. The first system, which certainly sounds interesting, is based in the Transformers universe. With that system, you are going to be creating your own robot with its own unique character, and apparently all you need is some dice, friends, and your imagination. The book is going to give you some complete rules for the players and the GMs, Game Masters, and there's going to be, apparently, it's going to be focused on fun, storytelling, and epic combat. There are tools for creating weapons, equipment, vehicles, and villain dossiers, and there's even introductory first level characters ready to play straight away. And if Transformers isn't your bag, well, perhaps G.I. Joe will be. This is the second roleplay game that Renegade Game Studios is going to be putting out, and this G.I. Joe core rulebook is going to be 304 pages long, and again, it's going to have all of the information there for you to create your own GI character and all that sort of goodness, as well as the information for the Games Master to run sort of the journey for you. Both of those are going to have deluxe editions, so you'll be able to get like the core rulebook and they say just play with dice and friends, or there will be sort of the deluxe versions with custom dice, maybe a dice bag, that sort of stuff included. In Kickstarter news right now, Next Level Miniatures, it seems like maybe they're sort of slightly to do with Grey Fox Games. Basically, they are putting on a Kickstarter for a load of miniatures. You've got a lot of different monsters, but definitely some player characters sort of stuff in there. If it's your sort of thing, might be worth checking out. It looks like it's got about 10 days as of recording left on that Kickstarter. So probably 8 or 9 days when you're seeing this. And last but not least, Gale Force 9 has announced a range of D&D miniatures coming in Q4. These are going to be the collector series of Witchlight miniatures. So you've got a range from the Rabbit Folk to Warlocks and a lot more. Some very interesting and cool looking miniatures from Gale Force 9. I'm excited to see what WizKids sort of retaliates with for their sort of Witchlight sets. So that'll be very interesting. But Gale Force 9 also known very much for doing good quality miniatures. Anyway, that's enough with the news. And just before we go, this was a really interesting art style, design and stuff from ArdisFoxx Art. Now, this was sent across so you can see sort of the process that goes into creating what I can only sort of say is wonderful looking artwork. Now, some links will be in the description box for what that was put together for, and so you can go and see the ArdisFoxx channel. Absolutely stunning. I wish I could draw that well. And with that stunning piece of art, that wraps up today's show. Let us know in the comment section below, what is your favourite D&D, Pathfinder, Starfinder, whatever, monster, and why? Is it like me, sort of more of a range, or is there one in particular that really grabs you? And of course, if you want to be involved in the show, you can be. Join the Discord link. It will be in the description box below, alongside all of the involved creators, so check them out as well. And until next time, I'm Oliver East, signing out.